Welcome to our discussion today on reimagining the future of work, organized by the Boston Consulting Group and hosted by the Delphi Economic Forum. I am Mexi, and I'm joined today by Debbie Lovich, Managing Director and Senior Partner in the Boston office of the Boston Consulting Group. Ms. Lovich is also Global Lead of BCG's People Strategy topic. She co-leads BCG's Build, Operate, Transfer offering, and recently BCG's efforts on the future of work. So here we are. She's joining us from Boston. I'm joining from Geneva, Switzerland. The event is being hosted by the Delphi people in Athens. So quite a global setting, I would say, Ms. Lovich. Welcome. So nice to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be part of this.
Okay, our discussion will last 20 minutes, so I'm going directly to my first question, just to set a little bit the background of our discussion. So, before the pandemic, there were big discussions about how the future of work is changing and how automation and digitalization are disrupting systems, norms, and people. And now with the pandemic, we all came to realize that things have changed, that notions like work, location, and time have become very fluid, very flexible, and very hybrid, I would say. So we are now in year 2 of the pandemic and in year 2 of hybrid work. What lessons have we learned? What is your take on all these developments?
I think the lessons are manyfold. There is so much we've learned this past year. And I believe in my heart that, after these years of the pandemic, people will look back at how we worked before COVID and think it's silly, right? You used to drive, in traffic or take the train or the bus or fly, to work, sit at a table, in a cubicle, and then, go home. That will seem silly, right? And the fact that we get all our work done by meetings will seem silly. And, what COVID has taught us is that there are many ways that we could get the work done, many ways, not just location, but as you said, also time, the notion of asynchronous collaboration, reducing face time, and also more flexibility to give people the opportunity to fit their work around their lives instead of their lives around work. So a lot of lessons to mine, for sure.
We have some studies, some surveys showing that after the pandemic, a great number of employees would like to continue to work from home, either entirely or partially. In your view, and based on the evidence you have so far, do you think that hybrid work is actually the new normal?
I do. I do think it's the new normal, but I want people to be really careful when they think about hybrid work, because hybrid interactions are really hard. And so we need to be careful that hybrid work is, teams decide together what days are they in the office, what days are they work from anywhere, right? And so we really have to work hard to develop hybrid norms that make it effective and don't go back. The other thing about hybrid work and remote work, for that matter, is we can't simply replace what we used to do in the office online, right? We have to think about, all right, how do we connect socially through a camera, right? How do I reach inside the room and ask you, I love that painting behind you. Can you tell me about it? It's gorgeous, right? How do you socially connect? How do you coach people remotely? And in fact, there are ways to coach that are even more effective, because in the middle of a meeting, I could send you a quick private note. That was a great comment, but I want you to do this next time the point comes up, right? We could coach live in ways that you couldn't in a live room, but we have to be intentional about it, right? We have to say, okay, to make hybrid really work well, what are the practices we need, like norms, like upskilling managers, and how do we train people and really build the muscle to do it?
So you're saying actually that this has to do with collaboration, and we need to actually redefine our norms of collaboration and our practices, right? Completely
Absolutely.
from scratch. And I read one of,
Well, yeah, go
please.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, I read
I was
an
gonna,
article in Forbes. You you wrote about hybrid work, that it's time to hurry up.
yeah, yeah. So here's my fear. Here's my fear. My fear is, we will go backwards instead of forwards, right? Especially with senior leaders. Senior leaders are so used to working in person, right? That's how they grew up. It's how they operate. And if we want to take advantage of hybrid work and the benefits of hybrid work, because it's not just flexibility, it's also productivity. We saw great productivity. Also engagement goes up, right? Your customers have gone online. So, that's a way to interact with them. So if we want to take advantage of that, we need to make it okay for people to work from home. And so my fear is that your leadership, and they have really large offices that are very nice to work from. But if the rest of the organization, your leaders going in, they will copy that, and the hybrid benefits will start to go away. And so the hurry up point is, hopefully the vaccine will get out globally. But so we have to, I said we have to really think hard about how do we make hybrid work work. And we've got to do that before people just go back to the old ways and the old muscle memory will kick in.
Mhm. Um, for sure, with regard to hybrid work, there are certain advantages and disadvantages for employers and employees alike. Um, I think one of the biggest challenges is how to ensure and maintain a healthy work-life balance in conditions of hybrid work. And you have been actually the brain behind the very successful PTO program at BCG, the aim of which was actually to improve work-life balance internally. Would you like to make some connections between the things you have achieved and the challenges of the new era in the post-pandemic period?
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things, the program I introduced at BCG, gosh, it's like 15 years ago already. One of the things that program taught us, again, that we have to um, talk at a team level to create working norms. So that was one lesson, right? Like have open, honest conversations about the work, about life, about how do we communicate. Right now during COVID, we're on SMS, phone, email, Slack, in meeting chat, right? Let's align on how we communicate. So one thing we learned is about team norms, right? The second thing we learned is about the importance of building a muscle to completely turn off and know the world won't fall apart. So one of the downsides of remote work is Zoom after Zoom after Zoom after Zoom. And if you work globally, like many of us do, I mean, you can work 24 hours a day. And so we have to build the muscle to put breaks in the day, breaks in the day. So one of the norms should be not just about when are we in the office and when we're not in the office. One of the norms teams should decide, okay, when are we all on? So if we ever need to collaborate, even on remote days, when are we all online so we could talk to each other, Slack with each other, jump into a virtual team room together. And then when are we off? And that's what we put in place with that program, times that you could just turn off. And you got to build that muscle to learn to stop, checking this and know the world won't fall apart. It may be interesting to just share some perspective that, I've spoken with hundreds of companies and worked with dozens of them, over the past year. And one approach we have to figuring it out, I'll talk through how we're thinking about what organizations need to do to make hybrid work work. The first is to align on what is it that we're solving for? What is our priority with hybrid work? Is it employee engagement? Is it cutting costs from real estate? Is it productivity to maintain the productivity we saw during the pandemic year? Is it to innovate faster, right? So, and of course it's all of that. but a leadership team needs to prioritize what's the most important thing. What are we solving for when we're moving to hybrid work? The second is to align as a leadership team on the design principles or guardrails, right? And design principles can be things like creating a level playing field, keeping the democracy that COVID created when everyone's in a meeting, right? You could see everyone the same. Anyone could raise their hand. If they're not comfortable speaking, they could put it in the chat. And it removed this unevenness that was before COVID when one person dialed in, they couldn't get a word in edgewise. And so one guardrail could be, if one person's on the screen, everyone's on the screen. A guardrail could also be, we need consistency between functions. So if a call center in one part of the organization is allowed to work from home, that means call centers in every part of the organization. A design principle could be, we believe in being together, so we have to at least half the time, be all together, right? So the leadership team should align on, first, what they're solving for, and then second, these design principles or guardrails for hybrid work. The third, and this is a bit of the work here, is to develop, different personas, because it's hard to say, okay, every different job, every different role, every different country, we're going to come up with what's the right mix of flexible work, both in terms of time as well as place. So it's good to come up with personas, different types of arrangements. One could be, one input to that is the nature of the work itself. Is it collaborative or individual? Is it creative? Is it automated? Right? And more collaborative and creative work will tend to require more time on site. So one input is the work of the work. The other input are, people and their preferences. And one of the things we see from our research is as many people want to be remote and flexible as they want to be in the office. And so we have to solve for a diversity of our people's needs. And we also have to recognize, by the way, on remote days, not everyone has a home they could work from, right? They may not have the right setup. They may have too many roommates. They may be the 40% of, at least in our research tells us that 40% of LGBTQ employees are not out at work. And so they may not want, their life in the background. So we have to provide, even on remote days, places people can work. So almost like WeWork, like facilities, and turning your office spaces into places they could come in, but they could be on screen in an individual office. So those are things. And then finally, also where the customer's gone. Because if you want to go back to meet with your customer, but your customer has moved to an e-commerce channel, you have to rethink the work, right? So those are inputs into the persona. And it's a bit work to do, but it definitely helps give guardrails, not just about, things like a level playing field or cybersecurity, but guardrails for types of jobs to teams. So those are the first three steps. The fourth and the fifth are really some of the learnings from my past work, changing how we work at BCG, is allowing teams at the team level to create norms for how they work. I spoke about this earlier. This is what days are we on site? What times are we all online? What electronic medium are we using to collaborate, right? There are so many different tools we could use as a team. Where are we digitally hanging out? And how are we talking to each other? Norms for what meetings are on camera versus off camera. I think with all this Zoom, we've lost the art of just a phone call without being on camera. And so we could bring that back. So those are examples of team norms. And one really important message is we don't know the answer to how to make hybrid work. I mean, even with my list here, this is new for the world. And that's where the fifth step comes in and is incredibly important, that we have to recognize that this is all new, right? We have to create a learning ecosystem to pulse check the teams, to collect data, to measure engagement, to measure innovation, to measure productivity, to see how is it working and mine the learnings and change. And so that learning ecosystem, will create a dynamic between number 2 and number 4 on this page, because the teams will set up norms. And then at the end of the week, they should spend some time to say what worked and what didn't. What should we change for next week? And as you learn what works for the teams, we could then feed that into revising design principles and guardrails. And that's a way to make this work truly experimental.
Uh, I think this is quite a new world. I think the future of work is quite new, the way we are describing it. For sure, this implies that the role of the employer gets redefined, I think, from scratch.
Yeah.
And usually we talk about the impact of the pandemic on workers and employees, and often the problems that the employers have to tackle are of, they are often overlooked. So I would like to focus as our last question on the role of the employer. How do you see things evolving? Is anyone being left behind? Are employers able to adjust sufficiently to the new normal?
I think so. So I'm an optimist, I'll tell you, but we saw wonderful things, right? At the beginning of COVID, employers adapted at speed and at scale, right? And we moved to do things that I think are changing the nature of the relationship between employers and employees, right? On wellness, we focused on making sure our employees are safe and got home. Childcare, so many employers stepped up and provided childcare. I have actually a column coming out in Forbes next week about the role employers are taking around wellness and new benefits. Employers engaged on mental well-being. This has been a really tough year mentally and physically, and employers have really stepped up their role. That has to continue. There's no going back. The other way employers, I think, have changed is treating talent more fluidly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Banks took employees from the retail banks that closed and put them in call centers. Insurance companies took employees that were dealing with vision and dental claims, because none of that was going on, and moved them into healthcare claims because so much of that was going on. And even we saw in China, companies moved capacity from company to another company to help out.
Mm-hmm.
And so talent became
There's
more
also
liquid.
global crowdsourcing. I don't know if this
Yeah,
companies now
more
need to redefine their business models to respond to new trends.
exactly. And I think, the good companies and organizations and leadership teams will not just say, okay, that was just for the pandemic, but they'll say,
Mm-hmm.
that was great. By moving employees around, they learned more, they developed more, it broke down silos in organizations, and it helped us manage cost and capacity, right? How do we keep it? How do we keep it? Like, imagine instead of having a job and a career ladder, right?
Yes.
You went into a staffing pool, you got put on a project or in a role for a while, and then you went back in the staffing pool. Then your career is more like, a jungle gym than a ladder straight up. And so I think employers showed incredible flexibility, and
Mm-hmm.
they should capture it, lean into it even further.
But they should also be supported somehow.
What do you
I mean, given some incentives to be able to implement all this new potential. I mean, to put it in practice.
I think, well, I think the incentives to put in those benefits and, treat talent more flexibly and join consortiums, like I think the benefit of that will be you will become a talent magnet, right?
Mm-hmm.
You will get
Exactly.
the best talent, especially in a hybrid world. You could attract better talent. You will drive engagement, and engagement drives productivity, as we all know, and retention. And you'll manage your costs better because you will move your workers to where they're needed, right? And in consortium, you will work with companies instead of having to build it yourself. You could tap into talent in a more variable cost way. So I think it's pretty exciting if organizations take that leap.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Time is up. Unfortunately, we have to finish here. It's been a short discussion, but very comprehensive and constructive one in many different ways. Thank you so much for your energy, your ideas, your enthusiasm. Thank you also to a big thank you to the Delphi Economic Forum and to the Boston Consulting Group, and of course a big thank you to our viewers watching us online. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.